So is Annie one of the contenders of the top decks of Spiritforged? Well, ended up winning a regionals and has had some pretty interesting showing. So we're going to take a look at where Annie is currently at, how it's done in regionals past, and then what could be happening as we get ever closer to Spiritforged releasing in English this Friday. So a lot to dive into, and we're going to be starting right now. And this is a really good thing to see because, yeah, we were worried that this was the League of Draven, and this is still something that is very possible. But one thing that's really cool to see is that Annie was able to still make its impact. Not only that, Azir getting second place is pretty cool to see, but with that, I want to say that Annie has had a really interesting journey throughout the entirety of this game. When we started with Origins, when China was playing it before the game even released in English, Annie was nowhere to be seen. You didn't see her necessarily even top 64 necessarily in it, and she was way in the dark on how powerful she really was. And it was all Kai'Sa and Master Yi. That was it. And Sold Out was someone who was really starting to bring things in online tournaments and was really starting to develop Annie as a formidable foe to the Origins meta. And then as things started to gain momentum, we saw Annie starting to win these online tournaments through Sold Out time and time again. It was starting to gather some attention. Some people were starting to get interested in trying out the deck. And oddly enough, it ended up actually being one of the most powerful decks and ended up even taking Houston as the first English regionals. So I gotta say, I'm really impressed with what Annie has been able to do, and it is nothing short of extraordinary. She is still a very difficult deck to pilot, don't get me wrong, but it's really comforting to see that, there is something still formidable, especially even in the same color of Draven, but was still to be competitive a little bit better. And so, again, though, we're going to be taking a look at maybe we see Annie start to come in a little bit more competitively if people start taking things down. Not only that, we do have 2 regionals coming out in English. We're down to 11 days by, it being 210 for Italy. And then not only that, at the end of the month, we also have Las Vegas regionals. So this is something to really keep in mind as we continue to develop this meta. And I feel like that we still have a big path of discovery, if you will. So we're going to be taking a look at the deck list, the gameplay, and things like that to help better have you understand where Annie is at, and if maybe this is a formidable deck for you to be able to take into Spiritforged. I'm really curious about this, and I'm also curious to see what this will also do to shake up the meta, because again, we've had some really fun instances of these last 2 regionals where Kai'Sa was able to win out on a tournament, and then also this week Annie was, and so it's like, okay, cool, well, we'll see what ends up happening. But again, the numbers will speak for themselves, and again, this is going to be on riftboundstats.com. You're able to go and take a look at that. Also going to be in the description below, so you can easily find these links for you. Now, this is an interesting top 64, and we're going to be diving into that statistically a little bit more in the video, but again, we have where Annie was able to get first, Azir second, Draven third, Irelia fourth, Draven fifth. So a lot to be seen there in those kinds of numbers. And then Kai'Sa finally being able to get a 6th place. Now, you're taking a look at this kind of divide, and we're seeing that uptick of not only Kai'Sa, but, a couple of others. Irelia was starting to have a really good showing, too. Normally, we've only seen Irelia maybe have 1 in the top 10, maybe 2. But Irelia had actually 2 pretty high showings here, which is nice to see. One that also might be really surprising is going to be Set. Set being in 12th place and 16th place wasn't something that we initially thought was going to be happening. But it looks like yeah, there's something there. And so maybe if you do end up having a set deck, this might be something to keep in mind on what you could probably do. Now, one thing that I want to take a look at is going to be the top 64 conversions here. Now, the reason why I say that this is really interesting is because on day one, of course, we have the full deck stats. So we get to see the conversion on how many actually showed up compared to how many actually made day two. Draven, of course, still had a really good showing there, though he is definitely getting a lot lower of results than what we are used to seeing. I mean, we had one where he was in the mid 50s and one where he was even in the 60% when this meta first started. That's unheard of. Him coming down to 34%, that still is a little bit high, but also when you're 22% of the field, which also is a huge, like near 8 to 10% drop from what we've had in previous regionals. That's interesting. That's something to keep in mind there. So Draven is even falling a little bit out of popularity, though he is probably still, if not the most powerful deck. And I do think that he still is. But Annie, you take a look at that. I mean, we had 7 that ended up showing up day 1, 3 made day 2. That's insane. Okay, that's almost unheard of numbers. And is that something to keep an eye on? Again, even with Set, though, going 8 showing up and 3 making day 2. 53 for Kaisa, 12 making day 2. That's 18% of the field right there. Really good showing. Otherwise, we had Irelia had 58 show up, so even more than Kaisa still. Had 10 that were able to make day 2. Ezreal, 12-2. Victor, 25-4. Master Yi, 9-1. Sivir, 10-1. And so some really interesting dynamics here. And heck, even 1 Lux. Really good to see. Love to see that Lux. Keep an eye on that. But anyway, out of 500 participants, though, we were able to have a lot of really good showings here. And again, it's going to be one that I want to keep an eye on. And again, is this maybe people not being used to what Annie might be able to do and maybe needing to adjust? And even with that, there's a really big debate currently going on in the meta on if this was necessarily a fluke. Is Annie really as powerful as she appeared in this tournament? Or is it more that, the China meta is just on a completely different level than what we expect in English? And that's something that you guys need to decide for yourself. And that's going to be a current debate. I mean, again, there is a little bit of that lack of trust in the Chinese meta, if you will, because it feels like that when they are deck building, they just aren't making these decks as efficient and as powerful as what they could be. And then when the game releases to the rest of the world, then that's really when the meta gets discovered. And so a lot of people are saying, yes, Annie had a great showing, but is she really there? And, we have a couple of people saying, yep, definitely. And some saying, no, it was a little bit of a fluke. There really are some better options here. So again, that's going to be the tough debate. And it's going to be interesting to see if we have a repeat of the meta with Origins in Spiritforged, where the Chinese kind of stuck to their deck lists and didn't really expand on that very well. And then all of a sudden we saw a couple of decks in English just skyrocket in popularity and power, and were able to do a lot in this meta. We'll see. But again, I really love what Annie was able to do. Now, with that, we are going to be looking at the deck list. So the big thing here, of course, is that Annie has a very powerful legend ability here that specifically says that at the end of your turn, ready to runes. So, I mean, again, always being able to have a +2 in your rune count is very helpful. Now, where Annie can struggle, though, is going to be the fact that you have to watch your rune count. If you are sacrificing way too many runes on the power cost, hiding cards, playing cards out that have power costs, or anything along those lines, it can really set you back and make it difficult for you to be able to take the game to your opponent. If you are able to find that balance and dynamic, it can be much better for you. So again, I really love what this deck was able to do, though, and we're going to dive into what it specifically can do. Now, first and foremost, again, we're not seeing any fizz here. That's not necessarily a big deal. But again, it almost feels like the Annie here is a worse fizz. It is nice that you are able to get any spell card, that's going to be a big boost here, but you're not necessarily running runes that are spells that cost more than 3 runes anyway. So again, Annie still being able to get any spell back is really good, and the fact that you can use it again and still put it back into your trash and be able to utilize it again is awesome. I like that. One thing though that is a little bit concerning is that, yeah, you don't see necessarily any fizz to be able to fish things out. Now, this is a good step in the right direction because, again, one thing that I saw was I thought at the beginning of this meta that there was just too many people that were going too far into Spiritforged. And this seems like it is a really good balance where you're using the power of what Annie is able to bring while still not going overboard in a lot of the red and purple cards that you have in Spiritforged. And so I really do like this deck idea. And of course, now you're not using Bloodshot or Blood Rush. Blood Rush adds Assault 2, and you can choose it to repeat it for 1 additional cost. And you can add up to 4 Might to 1 unit or 2 to 2 units. Really powerful there. And something that can make a big difference. Now, Cleave can be a little bit more consistent in that case where it's just a guaranteed 3. That's fine. And it does the job well in that case. And that's going to be one of the hardest things that Annie is trying to do is being able to conquer back the battlefields. And we'll be looking at that gameplay too for 2 different rounds in this case here soon. But one thing that I really do like here is that, yeah, we have still the rebukes. We have the switcheroo. Switcheroo can be hidden. And it says that you swap the might of 2 units at the same battlefield this turn. Even if you don't want to do that, yes, you do have to pay an additional power cost. But you can save that in your hand and then play it out and be able to surprise your opponent with something like that. That, I think, is the power of Annie, is that you have a guarantee of being able to potentially hide something like a fight or flight, and then if they attack in, well, you've already readied up 2 runes because of your legend ability. Oh, what's that? Yeah, by the way, we have a switcheroo. Oh, by the way, we have a rebuke. You know, so it's like, okay, we can do our part on being able to win our combat so that we are able to hold. Yes, we don't get to draw cards like Draven, but we still have a lot that we are able to offer. Now, we do help mitigate that card draw with invert timelines, and this is maybe even becoming a little bit of an option against Irelia's and against Draven's, because again, Draven, anytime he wins a combat, which is, of course, one of the easiest things to do for purple, that's a different video, but invert timelines does a really good job at slowing down your opponent because it's like, hey, guess what? You have 7 cards in hand. All right, well, now you're down to 4. You're going to go up to 5 on your turn, you know, and it's like, oh, well, that did add a lot to the pool, you know, of the discard. That really sucks. And you're able to have probably 0 cards in hand by the time you play invert timelines. And then you're like, oh, by the way, now I'm good. I'm back up to 4. That can be very powerful for Annie in that case. Now, there is some debate on if you are running invert timelines, you need to be running scrap heaps, though this deck list does not. But a big reason why you would be running invert timelines with scrap heap is because it gives you that edge against your opponent. Meaning that you discard scrap heap with invert timelines, and you drop to 5 cards, and on the following turn 6. If you have 2 in your hand, so, you know, 2 additional cards, drawing up to 7. You know, so some insanity that you're able to get away with there. One thing that invert timelines could really suck against, though, is going to be the Miracle decks. Sivir specifically is a very powerful deck that loves cards in the trash. So if you're able to get more cards in the trash with, like, invert timelines, then it's like, cool, well, here's my Rashas out for free. Here's a bunch of combos that I'm able to utilize here. Oh, look, I got my last rights, and then I can summon out my units from the trash again. Oh, look, I got Ezreal back from the trash. Thank you. You know, things like that can be a little bit difficult to have to deal with. So, again, I still really do like that. There is only 1 invert timelines here. I think it is a great addition, but one that needs to to be watched over. It is also going to be maybe one that you want to side out, but again, I still need to play test this deck a little bit more. I've run a couple of games, and it is a very solid deck. One of my favorite cards, gotta say, Rengar. If you've been watching my videos, one of the things that I've been saying is that in this meta, Rengar, I feel like, is being slept on. I feel like he is just such a powerful card, and in something like Annie, I think that could be a big game changer. For me, I'm testing my Draven deck right now with 2 Rengar just because, especially in the mirror match, it's like, oh, by the way, I fight or flight your unit back to base, and you're like, okay, cool, Rengar comes out. Well, that's a 5 might. He's attacking in. Okay, cool, what can you do about that? We'll see. So again, I really do like this option because you're able to go in for 5 might. Then if you also have, you know, a cleave on top of that, it can be something to really surprise your opponent and allow yourself to be able to take a battlefield and win a combat to where Draven might not be able to have the sufficient answers to be able to do so. So I really like what Rengar is able to do. Yes, when defending, he has 3 might, but if you have something like Flash, cool, fine, back out anyway. And one of the biggest things, too, is, you know, if your opponent, like you're going against a Draven and they activate a spell card before attacking in, well, then you just react with Flash. You already know that you're probably not going to win the combat for the turn, so you just pull them back. You avoid the combat. Draven doesn't get any cards. You're okay with him getting a couple of points because then on the following turn, you can then answer back against what they're able to do. So again, I really do love these dynamics here that you got to watch out for. One thing too is 3 Draven Vanquishers. This is an interesting combo here, and I absolutely love it, mainly for the reason that you are able to, you know, when you win a combat, play a Gold Gear token exhausted, which is going to be very helpful for Annie. But not only that, when I attack or defend, you may recycle a red, and if you do, give me +2 this turn. That 6 might can already be difficult enough for a lot of units to try to get over. Then not only that, you have a bunch of your tricks in your hand or possibly being hidden that can make it all the more difficult to try to take this battlefield. So you got to be careful, but I love this card inclusion here. Then of course the 3 Kaisas to be able to draw additional cards, conquer fields, bring the aggression to your opponent. Really awesome choice there. 1 Noxus Hopeful, and then 3 Ferris Forerunners. Again, one of the best cards here. Kind of like what I've been saying, the Thousand Tail Watcher of set 2, though not as powerful, but still really good for 6 and a power, potentially getting 12 might. Because when it dies, you get to play out 2 3 might mechs, and that is devastating to your opponent because then you have 3 might mechs that are able to attack on the following turn. And with Annie's aggression, that could be something very difficult to try to answer back on. And so having 3, I really do like. Then, of course, on the side note, we have 2 Rengars, 1 of the Factory Recall to basically just return a gear to its owner's hand. Then on top of that, 2 Darius, and then 3 Mind Splitters. And so really cool side deck to be able to see. And it was able to get first, which is just really powerful to see here. Now, we are going to be taking a look at the gameplay real quick. And I really want to be curious about what this is able to do. Because, I mean, I'm very curious about what Annie will be able to answer here. And I think it could be something to be watching over here because it's powerful. But again, there is that caveat, and you can decide for yourself. Let me know down in the comments below if you think that Annie is the real deal or if this is just going to be something that will vanish over time. So let's see some gameplay and see what happens. And so right now, we are going into game 2. This is going to be against Irelia. We are going to be taking a look at 2 different gameplays, and you're already seeing a lot of the power that is here. With 3 points, we already have a Thousand Tail Watcher that is coming in. And that's going to be something pretty difficult for the Irelia to be able to deal with. Not only just having the hand knowledge of what your opponent has, but more importantly, you have a very difficult board state to try to deal with here. And so I think that's going to be one of the big strategies with Annie, is that you try to mitigate the amount of runes that you want to sacrifice to power costs, so that you are then able to have a better mid to late game. He's still building up his field here, but he was able to get to not only 3 points, but also being able to get a 1,000-tail Watcher out with the 7 runes. And again, that is going to be very powerful. And so again, we'll see what this Irelia is able to do. Now again, one of the biggest things that Irelia is able to do so well is to move from one battlefield to another and score multiple points each and every time. And so we'll see what is able to be happening here, as Irelia is able to now move back. That's going to be another target. So can sacrifice a rune to be able to ready her up with the legend ability if they so choose. But again, that's going to also be the hard part, because it's like, well, if you don't, then, or if you do, then it's going to be a lot of runes that you are sacrificing there. And that's going to be something very devastating at that point. And so one of the biggest things here is Irelia can do a very good job, again, at avoiding the combat, and that's going to be one of the biggest keys and why it's able to take on Draven well, though it is a very difficult matchup. And so Sneaky Deckhand's going to be moving into the battlefield, going up 4, and that's going to be the big thing. Taking out the Irelia, how do you deal with that kind of board state? And again, sometimes Irelia, I think, has a little bit slow of a beginning, mainly due to the fact that you have to, you're running very few units first and foremost, but you got to build up the things to keep Irelia alive. If you don't, then there are a lot of things that can just take her out, and then you lose a lot of your power. And that's going to be one of the big keys here, is if you're able to take out Irelia, then what you are able to do. But again, this card draw is going to be extremely helpful, as another Tide Turner is drawn off of the Sunken Temple's ability when Irelia is mighty. So very helpful right there. And we'll see what continues to happen, especially as a Boots of Swiftness is coming in. That's going to be absolutely powerful here for the Irelia. But likewise, we're still going to need some additional abilities here that need to be utilized. The Boots of Swiftness are going to be coming in attached, and that's going to be another equip moving up to 3. Not only that, you're going to be getting the +2 from the Boots of Swiftness as they move over to the other battlefield. And this is also an interesting play here on the Annie side. Could have taken both of the battlefields if they so chose, but they chose to go still on the offensive because, again, they were up in points. And so, yes, now that Irelia has been able to get both of the battlefields, now you still stand to be able to go up to 6. You were able to get a couple of points early on, and now we're able to start moving a little bit better here. So again, on that pass, it's going to be Annie's turn, and has some difficult choices to try to make here, but not one that is going to be too far-fetched. There's a lot of runes up, though. So, I mean, basically, the Irelia is saying, you know, I'm here to stay. I have a lot of responses that are going to make it very difficult. And one of the most difficult things to try to stop your opponent from taking said battlefield is going to be the signature spell of Irelia, which when you target your Irelia can swing 5. That in and of itself is just absolute insanity when you consider what that means. And so with the Darius moving in, that is going to be mighty. So a card drawn off of the Sunken Temple. And again, that is going to be a very powerful ability or battlefield for Annie to also utilize. And that could also be to the downfall of the Irelia here. And so everything is going to be moving in now. Of course, the activation of the Traveling Merchant is going to be able to discard and draw a card. The Draven will be discarded here as another card is drawn, possibly giving more answers here. And if he so chooses, I think he drew a Rebuke off the top of the deck. So any and all responses at that point can just rebuke that back. So the On Guard's going to be activated. That's going to give an additional +3 because the Irelia is targeted. Again, such a powerful champion right there that is so difficult to try to overcome. One thing you got to be careful, though, is not so fast is very possible to be having in hand, and also the deflect that the Irelia is able to keep. And so, again, another On Guard going up to 6 at that point, and still 4 runes at the ready. And so this is going to be a big battle, and if the Annie is able to take this battlefield, I think that will be the big deciding factor for this game. Now, yes, the Irelia is still going to live because of the Guardian there, but then another Mind Splitter is going to be coming out with a Rebuke, and ooh, that's interesting. So again, you can write down that information, which is going to be very helpful, and then pick any card that you want. And odds are, it looks like that Rebuke is going to be no more. And so again, already just a very powerful choice there. Something to keep in mind. So the Rebuke is going to be thrown into the trash, which can still get access with Fizz, though Irelia does not play Fizz, so nothing that you have to really worry about there, and there's not necessarily a whole lot to get spell cards out. And so another Defy is going to be coming in, though it hasn't necessarily had a whole lot of answers, and I mean, 1,000 Tel on a Darius coming in is going to be a very big deal, especially because now that you know the hand, there's not a whole lot that you're able to do to be able to take both battlefields. So regardless, it looks like Annie is going to be able to at least hold the Sunken Temple, go up to 7, and then move the Darius back, play potentially 2 cards, and then gain that 8th point. So this is a very scary situation here for the Irelia. As, yeah, it looks like it is going to be moving in. That will be 7 right there against the 2. And so it looks like, yeah, that's going to be an easy capture there. And the cleave in hand for the Annie is going to be a big deciding factor here. That's going to be 10 that the Draven is going to be able to utilize. And the scary part is, again, with the 2 runes ready for the Annie, it's like if he has a Rebuke, if he has anything along those lines, sacrificing those 3 runes could do a lot to really slow down the deck combination here. But again, Irelia can still be readied up pretty well at that point. So again, another channeled 2 runes here. Oh, and a Rengar. So not only that, you could move the Darius back, add the cleave, and then Rengar in as well. So that is going to be a lot of might that could be coming in here. Though you need to play 2 cards first. And yeah, you do have that with the Noxus Hopeful. Yeah, so you have more than enough runes to be able to have that combination to be able to attack in. And this is why Darius can be such a powerful combo. If he's able to survive from holding, moving back to base, playing 2 cards, and allowing him to attack into the other battlefield is powerful and can be very difficult for any answers. And so it looks like the Darius is going to be moving back at this point. You do have to be mindful of the Defies. That's going to be the big thing. Now, you know that your opponent does have 1 Defy here. Yeah, because he didn't see the additional draw. And so looks like the Kais is going to be coming in accelerated. That's going to count as another card. And then looks like a double Defy is going to be happening here. And that's going to stall out for another turn, but still, that's going to be very scary. I'm glad that he was able to pull both of the units back. Now, that is only going to mean that they will be able to go up to 7, and if there's anything that they're able to do to hold both battlefields, this could be a very difficult situation, but still does not have any cards to be able to stop or make the combat all that more effective here. So going to be trying to draw more. Great combo there in that case. Stack deck is going to be allowed to be played. Very powerful there too. And a charm is going to be here. So, or even like a ride the wind could be very powerful in this situation to move into the other battlefield. So where you think you might have an easy conquer, you might not. And so that could be something very difficult to play around here. Now, with only 2 runes at the ready, though, this is still a scary situation because, again, there's a lot of very powerful 2-cost spells that Irelia could be playing here. So the Annie is going to be going in, grabbing the cleave. And it looks like, yeah, nothing is going to be activated there. That's going to be drawing 2 cards, one for the Conquer and one for the 7th point. And then everything else is going to be moving in here. Now, it looks like a Ride the Wind is going to be moving over. And so that's an interesting thing because, yeah, it looks like that is just going to be ending the game right there at that point because, again, the combat would still be resolving first, which would be the 8th point, and then another combat would be started at that point. So the Annie is able to then take game 2, which is a great feat in and of itself, and love to see what that was able to do. So, again, we'll see what's able to happen in this finals match because, again, it's very interesting, especially also that an Azir even managed to make it here. And so we're going to be taking a look at game number 1 here, a little bit into the game. And we'll see what actually is able to be done here and maybe why Azir was able to make it into the finals here too. So with that being said, here we go, guys, into the finals. And I gotta say, I am so excited to see what is going to be had here as we start the game 1 of the finals here. And again, like we said, the Annie was able to take this, but you're going to get to see what this aggression that the Azir is able to bring. So it's already starting well with the token and a unit out onto the battlefield. And Annie not necessarily being able to have a play at the start. Still, Kai'Sa's going to be able to come in. And then the runes are going to be at the ready. So any response here is going to be helpful. But the tokens that Azir is going to be able to make can be a big difference maker here. And still, after even being in the finals, this is a long time that these competitors have been competing. A lot of thought processes, a lot of problem solving. It's a long day. And so, again, it's going to be interesting to see what is able to be done then. But it looks like the Cola of the Week is going to be incredibly powerful at that point. And then the, a Brutalizer is going to be a big difference maker too, especially as you can continue to move things around. That can be a big help. But then with the Ferris Forerunner coming in, that could be a good answer here. But still, you're already seeing the Azir being at 2 points, soon to be 3 points to 0. And a lot of equipment in hand, and even the signature spell, which is just so powerful for Azir, being able to create a lot of units based off of how many equipment you have out. So the more equipment that you're able to make, the better. And so again, here we go, going up to 3 points. And this is interesting also. The Azir being 9-0-2 and the Annie being 9-1-1. Gotta say, really love this. And looks like the Azir is going to be coming in. Not going to be accelerated at that point, but still going to be able to create another Sand Soldier at that point to be able to equip onto the Brutalizer. And that already is a scary board state, seriously. And then on top of that, even a hidden card. Now, you're assuming that that's probably going to be a Hidden Blade at that point. And so you got to be a little bit mindful about what that could entail. Because that's essentially 3 cards drawn on the Dreaming Tree, or if you want to take out the Ferris Forerunner, but it looks like it's guards instead. And that's going to be creating another unit, which also comes in with Weapon Master. That's going to be a big swing right there. And so even with the Cleave, that'll be going up to 9, and that is going to be enough to get the first point. And again, though, you got to be mindful of the Azir, and you got to be mindful of the signature spell. But still, that was a much-needed victory for the Annie there. And again, you got to be thinking, you're in the finals. There's no clock. You're able to think about your options as many times as you would like, as long as you would like. And so, again, it looks like we're going to be going with a double Ferris Forerunner at that point. That is 12 might, and if you happen to take it down, well, then on the next turn, they multiply, and you have 12 might that you have to deal with. Still, with 4 different units, which is why this can be such a powerful combination here. And again, you were able to see what he was able to do, where he didn't necessarily sacrifice a lot of his power. He waited until he was able to build up his rune state. But still, right now, it's 4-1 at this point. And unfortunately, all of his units are in the battlefield here. And another token is going to be able to come down and be created at this point, and that is such a powerful gear. Every time that you move, the Eye of the Herald says that you are able to play a 1 might recruit. And so here we go with a Rise, meaning that you are able to create a lot of Sand Soldiers. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4... 4 that are able to be created, and then you're able to ready 2 of them up, which can also even be creating more tokens at that point. And so again, this is going to be a very difficult board state. Great play right there. Gosh, it's like if you had the hard bargain at that point. That's also something that is very difficult for people to consider. If you do have the hard bargain in hand, you're guaranteed to at least be able to play it each and every turn on your opponent's side. And so I really do like the inclusion of that in the deck, though it is only at 1. And that, I think, is also going to be one of the hardest parts about this game, especially as we get more sets, is going to be, well, how do you fit everything into the deck? Oh, that is going to be such a good play. Being able to flash back your opponents or your units at this point. Then also with the Dreaming Tree, you are able to draw a card off of that. So great option there. And the 12 might will still be remaining ready. And so that's a big answer that you can then attack in on the other battlefield at that point and continue to just kind of crisscross there. Though this looks like it is going to be a difficult choice. It looks like a Tide Turner is going to be here. And looks like, I love playing the Tide Turner out and then the Flash, because then you get to discard, draw 1. Discarding the Draven at this point, drawing another Tide Turner, unfortunately. So maybe not something that you want to see, but being able to divide and conquer here is a great step in the right direction, as 2 Ferris Forerunners are now in both of the battlefields here. But still, look at how scary that base is for Azir. There is a lot of unit there. And then even on top of that, the Azir champion is going to be so powerful. As the Ferris Forerunner is taken down, that's going to be 3 might units, 3 might bots that are able to come in at this point. And then not only that, we are able to then go into the battlefield here. Now, with the 2 up, you still got to be a little bit careful. There's a lot of things that you can try to do to take care of the business. But right there, I mean, already getting a lot of might going into that unit there as it moves in. And that's going to be a well-timed fight or flight at that point. And looks like no Defy in hand. I mean, there's only 1 card in hand, and at that point, I mean, could just be wanting to draw the 2 extra cards. Or, I mean, heck, do you even just cast it now? Annie is completely tapped out, so there's nothing that you have to worry about except for sacrificing another rune, which could be a little bit of a sacrifice right there. And so is going to be destroying the One Might token. Dreaming Tree is going to allow him to draw an additional card on top of that. And another Cole is going to be coming in, or in hand at least. And the BF Sword. And so another Sand Soldier is able to get created on top of that. Well played there to be able to continue to maintain a very scary board state. Still, a lot of runes there for Annie. And Annie, the biggest thing that Annie can struggle with is, again, if Annie gets low on card draw, it can really be a difficult situation there. But again, the Azir is wide open in the sense of all runes are tapped. And on top of that, only having 4 runes, soon to be 6, of course, when the turn is passed, could be a little bit scary. But again, he only has the 3 going on 4 cards in hand, as the Ferris Forerunner is going to be taking it, going up to 4. Now, I do also like the Traveling Merchants that can really refine your hand there. But you still have to be very worried about what is to come on the following turn and what you're able to then do to get answers back on that. And so it looks like the Tide Turner is going to be moving in. That's going to be discard, draw 1. Still has a lot of units at the ready, but again, you can almost be reactive at this point until, of course, now him being at 6 points, you need to defend. And with that Azir out on the battlefield, how do you defend? That's going to be one of the biggest questions here. And so, again, still trying to draw the answers. Luckily, there are a lot of runes in hand for the, or a lot of runes to be utilized here for the Annie. But you still got to be so careful on what you would even choose at this point. Because that is a lot of might that can be coming in. The Draven is going to be a great response, though. And then everything is going to be stacked up at this point. On top of that, even if there is a Dreaming Tree, any spell that you target your own unit with, well, okay, cool, I'm going to then be able to draw an additional card. And so hiding on everything, he's going all in. But even with that, the 2 runes at the ready at the end of the turn is going to be taking him up to 7. Now that is something to be very mindful of here. And it's like, well, what do you do at that point? A Cole could be a step in the right direction, at least on taking something out. But that essentially will only be taking out a Traveling Merchant, which, you know, isn't going to be the best move there, but it can destroy a unit that has Brutalizer to be able to swing basically another +3, but it looks like both Brutalizers are ready to be equipped, though there is only 1 Calm Rune. Ooh, that is going to be tough. And so another unit is going to be created at that point. That's going to be a 1 Might unit that is able to be added. And we'll see what the responses are. So the Draven is going to have a sacrificed rune to be able to go up +2. And then even like something like a Switcheroo could be coming in, but it's going to be a Fight or Flight to be able to push it back. And if there is even something like a Defy at that point, that would be spending the final Calm Rune that he has. Oh, a Charm in hand, and it looks like, yeah, there is a Defy. So he is going to allow that to go through. The damage is going to be dealt. It looks like, though, that is only going to be 3. So a lot of utility that was sacked at that point. And it doesn't look like he necessarily has the answers to be able to take down these battlefields. And then again, Annie is going to be at a very high rune count on the following turn. And so with that 1 combat, a gold is going to be created here. Not that that will make the biggest difference, but it could. On the following turn, it could be very helpful to be able to maintain your rune count. But this is pretty much on a 2-turn clock at this point. If the turn passes, that's going to be 7. Can reinforce at that point. And still, you got to be impressed. The overwhelming power that Azir is able to produce is intimidating. I mean, rightfully so. And so it looks like a Charm is going to be moving back the Ferris Forerunner. And that could be a big turn too, going up to 7 at that point. And then you only have to deal with the Forerunner, because everything could then stack at that point into the adjacent battlefield. And so very difficult choice here. But it looks like a Tide Turner is going to be switching things around. If you do that with also the Draven at this point, that's one thing that you got to be a little bit careful of. Because if you switch with the Draven, then it could go up to 8 at that point when it attacks in. You would have to sacrifice another rune, but that's still 8 might that would need to be answered, and that could be very well the last of the might at that point. So Tide Turner, very good card to have hidden at this point. But it looks like a bot instead is just going to be a little switcheroo-y. And I mean, I think that is still a very good choice to be able to have. Especially because everything then would have to be sent in. And even then, if there's any tricks that the Annie has, it is pretty much over at that point. And only, I mean, gosh, only yellow runes for the Azir at this point. So in the sand tokens, I mean, there's only 2. So you got to be wondering, again, what they could be plotting here, planning out. And this is going to be the deciding factor, trying to get things going. But it looks like, again, going to be floating 2 runes. This is going to be the final push here. And it looks like one's going to be moving in, creating 2 tokens at that point. That's going to be 4 to 3. And that's going to be a rebuke at that point. And it cannot be defied, so it is going to be going back to hand. And the bot is going to hold. And maybe it might be that, the Azir player here is just trying to play it a little bit too safe. That's the scary part. Where he's not necessarily moving in with his Azir unit, and that's been costing him combats here, which has been giving a lot of advantage here. So now both bots are finally able to move in. He's able to go up to 7, though he has 3 runes at the ready and 2 cards in hand. Now, of course, with 7 runes, that is going to be able to go up to 5. You do have to be mindful of the Ferris Forerunner. The gold is at the ready. And you got to figure out, how do I get in here? And luckily with even the Annie, though, you could go Annie and then have a rebuke and even attack in. Could be the line here. But he has the rebuke in hand, so it doesn't need to. So you don't have to worry about not so fast being in hand either. Which is interesting. And so it looks like Annie is going to be coming in, getting the flash. Oh, that's an interesting line. Yeah, because then you're able to move 2 of your units back. Then you're able to draw 2 cards, and you still have the 1 rune at the ready for the cleave. So this could be a very major push to be the nail in the coffin of this Game 1 series. Very well played there. And you can see why Flash is such an expensive card. Okay, no, that's a joke, guys. Just so you know, don't send me hate in the comments because of me making that joke. Sorry. And so, again, that is going to be going up to 7 at that point. And then moving in the Tide Turner to be able to draw a card. That's going to be Sneaky Deckhand no more. To be able to then get another card in hand and having 3 runes at the ready. The Rebuke is going to be able to be targeted here, wherever the answer might be. But again, you're looking around and you're like, I don't necessarily know where there could be an answer. And that's going to be game number 1 as the scoop takes place. And guys, that is the power of Annie. Now, again, that comes back to the question, is Annie actually going to be that top tier like what we saw in Origins? or is this a little bit of a fluke? We've looked at both gameplays so far, and guys, it could be legit, but again, it's going to depend on how the decks are built. Again, the regionals now for China are over and done with. And we have 2 that are coming up in English here in the coming weeks. There's going to be a lot of exciting things coming in February and some things to watch out for. I myself am going to be competing in Vegas, and so we'll see how that ends up unraveling here. But the biggest thing is we'll see how it all ends up falling into place. Now, with that being said, that is going to be the end of this video. Let me know, do you think that Annie is the real deal? What changes would you possibly make to the deck? And is this something that you would maybe run at your locals or even competitively at a regionals? Let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, guys, have a good one.